Good morning, everyone, and welcome to University Unitarian Church in Seattle, Washington. It's Sunday, January 3rd, 2021. Happy New Year. My name is Jon Luopa. I'm the senior minister here and greet you this morning. And I'm here in our sanctuary with our musicians, John Carrington on harp and Callie Lindenmeyer, our soloist, together with our tech crew, Byron Christad. We begin a new year together in some unexpected ways and in some what are now familiar ways, having been a virtual church for nearly 10 months. But it is good to start this time together with you. So let us begin our service this morning. We gather together today as a community of faith, and we come in search of life's meaning. All of us know despair, all of us know exaltation, and every one of us bears a burden. Each has a moment of weakness and a moment of strength, and all sing songs of sorrow and of love. May our worship this morning bring us strength along our way, and in the presence of the sacred, may we come to know our true selves, once again finding a fresh impulse to do good and to love one another. Come, let us worship together. Friends, I invite you to sing with me the doxology you will find printed on the screen, and our opening hymn immediately following, O Life That Maketh All Things New.
From all that dwell here
Friends, as we prepare to receive the morning's offering, let me thank you in advance for your continued and strong generosity of the congregation's work in the larger world and among ourselves. You've been a good and faithful people, even though it's been hard for us not to have all of the traditional blessings of being together over the course of the pandemic. But we are hopeful that when it is time, we shall return together again and enjoy each other's company. So as we prepare then to receive the offering this morning, I invite you to join me in saying the words we customarily say each week. This church is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. When we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within it. Friends, I invite you now to join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation as we take a moment to quiet and center ourselves, seeking that which renews us both as persons and as a people. Well, we've made it through another sweet, sour time. And here we are at the end of the year and the beginning of a new year, a little nibbled and frazzled and puzzled and awed. And in need of what? A chuckle, maybe. More like a long, hearty laugh. Such is our need, and this is our wonder. Is life always only humorless, or as grimly serious as we have made it out to be? May we surprise ourselves by giggling down the wailing walls of our endless grievances, and have all our waddling pomposities go pop. Source of all, of love, of laughter, as of tears, shake us up and teach us to laugh at ourselves, at our sober solemnity over our petty preoccupations with ourselves. Through all the hurt and all the adversity visited upon us and self-inflicted, until our laughter lures us deep beneath the terrors without names, beneath the questions without answers, and beneath the pain without relief. That it lures us deep to all the love in us unused, and to all the strength unspent, to all the courage untapped, and to all the dreams unrisked, and to all the beauty unexpressed, all the way down to the inescapable bottom, to the conviction that we must get on with becoming who we are, as fully as we can, as unflinchingly as we can, as accurately as we can, which is to say, as gracefully, as powerfully, and as faithfully as we have been created to be. To these imperfect words, we add the silent intentions of our hearts and minds. So may it be. Amen. Our second hymn This morning is a traditional hymn that we sing after Christmas, "We Three Kings of Orient Are," and we sing it because it is supposedly to be sung on January the 6th, which is the feast of the Epiphany. It marks the end of the 12 days of Christmas, which came about because very early in the history of the Church, the Western Church celebrated the birth of Jesus on December the 25th, and the Eastern Church celebrated Jesus' birth on January the 6th. And this is what happened for about 300 years until the Church Council decided in a compromise and said, we'll celebrate both the 25th and the 6th, celebrating events in the life of the infant Jesus, and we'll call it the 12 Days of Christmas, and that's where that came from. The other reason why they wanted to extend the celebration of Jesus' birth was because the Romans were pretty raucous in their New Year's Eve celebrations, and by extending the solemnity of the incarnation of God on earth in Jesus Christ, it would extend into January and somewhat temper the parties. I'm not sure that really happened, but it's a great story. We Three Kings of Orient Are. I've mentioned earlier in the service, during the prayer and meditation time, that we seem to have made our way through another sweet, sour time. We've been through a difficult year, a difficult 4 years, exacerbated certainly by the pandemic of the last year, and are now on the cusp of a new beginning. At least we hope so this week, not only for our country and our government, but hopefully in some turnaround with the pandemic and its effects on all of us and the economy. All of this, of course, in addition to our own personal struggles and challenges and joys that we have had over the last year. For several years now, it's been a custom of mine to return to a poem that I found some years ago, actually, that I have found instructive at this time of year, as we close out and as we open up for a new life. The poem was written by David White, who is a Pacific Northwest poet, lives on Whidbey Island, among other places in the world. We like to consider him a special Northwest poet, but like all very good poets, his poetry is universal in its appeal and in its meaning, because it speaks to the condition of people in many places in the world and at many times. The poem is written in the first person singular, so I'm going to share it with you in the beginning that way, but then I'm going to make it a plural, so hopefully it would be applicable to all of us. The poem comes from his collection called The Heart Aroused, a book I recommend to you, as I do many of his works, which you can get easily through many different sources. The poem has 3 parts, so it's perfect for a preacher because it's a 3-part sermon in a way. And it actually consists of 3 petitions, requests. A request to be released, a request, secondly, to recapture, to find again hidden resources, and finally, a petition to be reborn. So there it is: release, recapture, and rebirth. Here it is. Let my history, then, be a gate unfastened to a new life, and not a barrier to my becoming. Let me find the ghosts and histories and barely imagined future of this world, and let me now have the innocence to grow just as well in shadow or light by what is gifted in this land as the one to which I was born. Let our history then be a gate unfastened to a new life, and not a barrier to our becoming. All of us inhabit a story we have inherited and we have helped to shape during the course of our days and our years. We take refuge in these stories. They help to give us meaning and purpose and direction. They are also very much the whole sense of our identity. Having a story, being part of a story, is really essential, I think, to good mental health. The poet C.K. Williams, though, said that he attributed the great distress in so many parts of the world due to the fact that people were confused about what story they inhabited, or they were earnestly seeking a story to become part of. This is, of course, a whole sermon in itself, but if you think of those who hold on to rigid interpretations of life and the world, those of a more fundamentalist stripe, whether religiously or politically, the identity is so strong there because they then feel that they are part of a story that is unshakable, you see. But we have these as well for ourselves as individuals. And sometimes when we run into difficulty and we seek ways of interpreting or understanding our story again, maybe through therapy or the conversations with a friend, we recognize that our story that we inhabit, that we embody, can sometimes be a barrier to our becoming and to our living. Our story becomes a handicap. I have had the experience many times in my life when asked a question, I give a response, and I think to myself, do I still believe what I just said? And sometimes I recognize that I don't. And I recognize even further that maybe I am continuing to inhabit a story that really doesn't make sense anymore. Its purpose has been served, but I carry it around as a part of who I think I am and what I need to do, and yet it is part of a dead story or a former story, no longer helpful. So you see, the stories that we have, that we tell about ourselves, can actually be a barrier to our growth. And in this first petition, in this poem, David White asks us to have our history be as a gate unfastened, that we open the gate. And a gate, as you know, is both a threshold and a barrier. But the hope is that we are able to let it be a threshold to something new, to something different, maybe even to something difficult. This is as true of individual persons as it is of communities of people and even of nations. So much of the struggle that we face in fighting each other has got to do with the fact that we are competing stories, one with another. But then he goes on to the next part of his poem and says, not only might I open the gate of my story, but then let me find, he asks, let me find the ghosts and histories and the barely imagined future of this world. Let me find the ghosts, the presences, and their stories indeed. I think every person is really a composite of many threads woven into us by all of the persons who have had a significant impact in our lives, all the experiences that we have had that are transformative, each of us a unique tapestry of all of these presences. This is particularly true of persons who've made an impact on us, whose residue continues in our own thinking and in our own acting. In this way, I sometimes say that we are always companioned, you see, never alone in the world, but always companioned by these presences that have helped to shape us who we are. It can be as silly as something like looking in the mirror and saying to myself, as I did not too long ago, oh my gosh, I look like my old man, for crying out loud. Well, that's not too bad, I guess. There have been other times, too, when maybe I've done something extraordinarily kind to someone. I'm aware of it, and I'm aware that I most likely did that because my mother was the kindest person I ever knew. And she taught me that there was only joy in being kind to other people. And so you see, her presence continues to live on in me. Other relatives, teachers, colleagues, parishioners, friends, who can trace themselves, I can trace them in myself. Let me find them again, David White says, and let me find their stories and how their stories are woven into mine. So not only should I release, but I need to recapture those and the significance and the meaning of those. But not only that, what we also need to recapture is the barely imagined future of this world. I think that's the hope piece in this poem. All of us have dreams, all of us have hopes, but over the course of time, experience, circumstance, company can chasten our hopes, and we can be discouraged to the point where cynicism is really our daily bread. We don't think things are really going to much change. They're always going to be as tough and as hard as they always are. And so that sweet, innocent part of the barely imagined future, the necessity of regrasping it, holding it, letting it become a part of us, is really essential if we are to grow. One of my mentors used to say that he was a terrestrial pessimist, but a cosmic optimist. I like that. I can identify with both parts of that story. And when I'm in my better self, or as Lincoln said, the better angel in our natures, I go more to that cosmic place. So let me open my gate. Let me look within for the presences of those who've made a difference in my life. Let me grab again some piece of hopefulness for the world, for all of us, for myself. And then the third part of the poem, I think, is the most astonishing in its phrasing. He says, "And let us now have the innocence to grow." What a wonderful, wonderful phrase that is, worthy of long reflection, I'd say. What is the innocence to grow? As I've played with this, thought about this, been taught about this over the years, I think what David White is talking about there is to finding the kind of innocence to grow that children have, without preconceptions, without pre-made interpretations, without any experience that teaches them whether they should be worried or not, but just going forward and experiencing and trusting themselves to make sense for the first time of something maybe. Many other times in life, they will make sense of it again. To have a kind of childlike purity and simplicity in our growing that isn't chastened by experience and the wisdom of aging. And I can say that to you certainly as someone who is on the other end of that spectrum, not anymore on the young end of it. About a month ago, I received a telephone call from the ministers of my former congregation in Connecticut to tell me that one of the congregational elders had died at the age of 104. She had been a member of the church for 90 years. And they were going to have a Zoom memorial service for her, and the ministers were inviting me to come and participate in that. You knew her well, they said. You knew Betty well. She loved you. You loved her. We're going to celebrate a long and wonderful life. Many great stories were told about Betty. 90 years, a member of the church. Always a joy to be around. When she turned 100 years old, the town in which she lived, they interviewed her to ask her about her life and what she had learned. And of course, they asked her, "What do you think is some of the keys to your longevity, Betty?" And without missing a beat, she said, "Always stay with young people. Always stay with the children. That's where the edge is. That's where the growing edge is." And I think that's what David White was talking about when he said, "Let me find again the innocence to grow." Just as well, as David White says, just as well in shadow or light. If you find the capacity to grow that way again, it will serve you whether or not you live in shadow or in light. And because of that, the reason for that will be that you have been able to discover, as White says, what is gifted in this land, what is gifted in the place you inhabit, the space you occupy, the people you associate with, the work that you do, that no matter where you find yourself, there will be gifts all around you that you have not seen, that you have not celebrated, that await your embrace. If your eyes can be so opened to grow simply in light or shadow, you will recognize the gifts that are all around you, that have been there all the time, and they are there for your keeping and for your celebrating. And if you are able to do that, then the final sentence of the poem may ring true, that you will recognize that this land you occupy, this space you inhabit, is the one to which you were born. You will be able to say to yourself, the work that I do, the calling that I have, the vocation I adore, I was made to do this. I was gifted to do this. I was meant to be a teacher. I was meant to be a scientist. I was meant to be a pastor. Any of these things, I have found my way. I have found my giftedness. How lucky am I? And I have been supported in my life by strangers and by intimate friends who have helped me be who I ought to be. So, friends, this is my good New Year's wish for all of you and for all of us. It applies, of course, to us as individual persons, but it also applies to us as a community of faith. This church has a long and distinguished history in the city of Seattle, but we are called upon now at this new time, this new year, to look at the history of where we have been and to open it as a gate into a new beginning, and to not continue doing and believing and acting in ways that we have always done for more than 100 years. Of course, much of that will continue, but not all of it should continue. Let us look back over the generations and lift up those persons, those presences, those ghosts whose stories have helped to shape this community into the congregation that it is. And let us be bold enough and brave enough to imagine a future once again that is not yet fully here and that requires our hands and our hearts and our minds. Let us have the innocence to grow. Let us not be too sophisticated in our analysis, sure of all the right answers and the right ways, because we don't know them. We are heading into a future that is as yet unscripted. We will write it as we go along. There will be times of shadow. There will be times of light. And if we are lucky, the great creator of all the universe, of all life, of our own lives, will gift us in this place. And we will be able to say that we were born to be here, to be together, and to do this work. Happy New Year. My deep love to you all. Amen. Our closing hymn this morning is an African American spiritual, hymn number 350, The Ceaseless Flow of Endless Time. It's been a real treat, hasn't it, for us to have John Carrington back with us, and Callie, our cantor this morning, and our singer. We are grateful to you both for enhancing this worship service. Thank you so much. May the care that we have for each other lure us deep and deeper to all the love in us unused, and to all the strength in us unspent, to all the courage in us as yet untapped, and to all the dreams unrisked, and to all the beauty unexpressed, that we might grow as gracefully, as powerfully, and as faithfully as we are destined to be. Amen.